Namaskar. Welcome to this special transmission as we look at the ongoing protests across university campuses of United States. Lots of things happening. We are going to touch upon that. We are also going to look at how much money has gone into this. It's going to blow your mind. And we have a fairly big slide deck to go over with you. And let's welcome our guest of the day, Utsav Chakrabarti, and Utsav is going to walk us through all the different organizations that got money from various sources. The money is mind-boggling. We'll not reveal it right now. Once you start looking at the slide deck, you'll understand the magnitude of this problem. I don't think even the Biden administration expected so much money to be pumped into this. Somebody has it really for this administration. That's all I can say. Let's welcome Utsav Chakrabarti. Utsav, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel. How are you?
Namaste, Sree. Happy to be here.
So, Utsav, I'm going to, with your permission, start this slide deck going. So you can take a look at it and we can talk to that. Viewers, fasten your seatbelts because the money that is being bandied about is mind-blowing. First, please like this video, and if you have not subscribed to our channel, do subscribe to our channel. Here we go. Go ahead.
The usual suspect, Sree. So this is everybody knows Gorge Sorors, everybody knows Open Society Foundation, but what we are going to look at today is the modus operandi of how these organizations are operating in regards to the anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, quote-unquote pro-Hamas protests in America. And we are also going to look at some of the organizations that are getting this share of the money. And it would be interesting to note that not all of these organizations are known to us. There are a lot of organizations that we are not aware of. And at some point, even though it's not in the presentation, I'm going to mention some South Asian or Indian American organizations as well. But that will be a surprise for the end.
Yes, indeed.
So next slide, please.
Yeah.
So the group that is controlled by Gorge Soros. So I should say it's not just Gorge Soros, but it's Open Society Foundation and its allies have given more than $15 million since 2016 to different pro-Hamas activist organizations in American campuses. That is over a period of many years. So it's on the surface, it may not look that much amount of money, but you have to remember that these are small campus organizations, and per year, $2.5 million goes a long way in campuses because these are activist groups. They don't have full-time employees for the most part. Next slide, please. So the biggest channel, I should say, that we are observing is the 𝗤𝙧𝙤𝙪 Center, a group that is very active in campuses. And the different groups that Gorge Soros and his Open Society Foundation control, they donated about $13.7 million through 𝗤𝙧𝙤𝙪 Center. Now, what will be interesting is that many of you who have watched our previous videos and many of you who are aware of all the things that are going on in America, this is also a group, the 𝗤𝙧𝙤𝙪 Center, that has funded many anti-Hindu organizations in America, including Hindus for Human Rights, and lo and behold, the most infamous California caste case, Equality Labs. So you can see that there is a very well integrated network at play here. Next slide, please.
Just 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So one group that is very active in getting funds from 𝗤𝙧𝙤𝙪 and actually has been very active on the platform around the country, especially in the Midwest. A lot of protests in the Midwest are being done by this group called Adala Justice Project. So it is actually a very interesting group. It's led and run by Islamists, mostly Sunni Islamists, but it has a lot of white Americans, including Jews, in its quote-unquote team. And most of them are obviously leftists, or not just leftists, but extreme leftists in today's parlance. And they have been very active in campuses around the Midwest, including in Ohio State University, and of course in different universities and campuses around Michigan, which is a very important state, as you all know. A very high Muslim population, very high Arab Muslim population, actually, in that area. Next slide, please. So another organization that is known to our community, those of you who watch our shows and have been observing, is Jewish Voice for Peace. It is spread across the country. It's I shouldn't. It's very ironically named Jewish Voice for Peace because it's one of the few organizations that has gone out and openly praised Hamas. So Hamas is a UN designated and US designated terrorist organization. So that's quite ironic that it's called Jewish Voice for Peace. And interestingly, the person who is involved and runs Jewish Voice for Peace is the husband of Sunita Vishwanath, who runs Hindus for Human Rights. So you see, again, there is a connection here, and that has gone to the level of family connection. So
Bunty or bubbly of United States.
Bunty, that's a good way to put it. Very good way to put it. So that's another huge pan-American effort that's coming. And it's, just like Hindus for Human Rights, this is another organization that claims to be Jewish, but has at every point in its entire process supported not just pro-Palestinian groups, but also pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist groups, including violent ones, which Hamas is. Next one. So there is another organization in New York, which is called the Arab American Association. Again, by name, you can see it's mostly an Arab organization. Now, this is another interesting organization because this is not a per se campus organization. It is also a small business, taxi cab driver. So basically any low income or low middle income group, Arab community based organization. And it has a lot of support from amongst the left in the community because, in New York, most of these people have some form of union. There is a taxi cab union. So, they have a left of center leaning. And this is a very interesting organization too. It is not necessarily Islamist in nature, but it is extremely left in nature. Next one. And of course, it's in here. I was going to mention this one. 𝗤𝙧𝙤𝙪 Rising Up and Moving. So as you can see from the name 𝗤𝙧𝙤𝙪, it's an organization that focuses on people of Indian origin. It has a lot of Pakistanis. It has a lot of Hindus from the Caribbean countries. Again, if you notice, in New York area, there are a lot of Hindus who are of Caribbean origin, mostly of Indian origin, who had moved to the Caribbeans or were taken to the Caribbeans more than a century ago. And they're quite established around New York in middle level and lower middle level income segments. And they run small businesses. They do a lot of restaurants, everyday mom and pop stuff. And they have been, the Soros has been trying to unite those groups into a larger left-leaning encampment. And this group is called 𝗤𝙧𝙤𝙪 Rising Up and Moving, which is their focus-based organization. But there are also a lot of Indians of Indian origin and a lot of Pakistanis and Bangladeshis involved in this. So again, another group that will eventually turn its guns against us. Next slide, please. So this protests were co-sponsored by a gentleman called Amin Hussain, again a professor at NYU. You can see that the epicenter of these activities are in the East Coast because Gorge Sorors and its organizing tentacles, his organizational tentacles, are most active in the East Coast, even though they are also active in the Midwest as well as in the West Coast, in California primarily. Next one, please. Again, another organization that is quite apparent from its name, Students from Justice in Palestine, again funded by Gorge Soros. This organization is very active in Columbia University. So this is the one that has been leading all the efforts in Columbia and as well as in Berkeley, UC Berkeley. Their organization has a lot of Muslim support, and this one actually has a lot of Sunni Muslim support. So this is one of those organizations where you also see imprints of radical Sunni groups in America that are in the form of CARE, ICNA, ISNA, and all these Muslim Brotherhood, Jamaat Islami linked group. They have a lot of footprint on this particular organization. Next one, please. Again, US Campaign for Palestine is again another group that is very much connected to the students. Another one where there is a lot of left-leaning white Americans, not necessarily Islamists, but their leadership is controlled by pan-Islamist groups here. Next one. So, as you can see here, groups like Adala Justice Project, they have been doing this for a while. and they have been constantly showing quote unquote Israelis as, basically they have been dehumanizing Israelis, which is something that we are very familiar with. We have faced this in Kashmir. They have dehumanized Hindus and Indians in Kashmir for a really long period of time. So the modus operandi is pretty much the same, and they have fit into this colonial narrative where they present Israel as a colonial state which is trying to colonize these people. So the narrative is kind of similar to what we used to face in Kashmir, and this has been going on for a really long time. So it's the new generation of those left plus Islamist groups that are working together with those narratives. Next slide. Again, as we mentioned, all these groups have been openly pro-Hamas. What is interesting is that not each one of them is run by Islamists. There is a strong presence of other ethnic groups, other religious groups, including white Americans, Jewish Americans, as well as quote unquote Indian Americans, or as they would call it, South Asians in many of these groups. If you go and see the campus protest, it is very diverse. In fact, what is very uniquely visible in some of these protests is that there is actually less members from the African American communities in many of these protests. Most of these protests are led and run by white American groups. And of course, there are a lot of Indian Americans also in these protests. So you can see that the appeal is pan across ethnicity and across religious lines. The narrative is also across ethnicities and across religious lines. But the messaging is always in support of Islamist, and the messaging is always in favor of Islamization. So, it's a very successful propaganda project that has emerged in American campuses over the last 1 month. I think we can discuss a little bit about, who is doing it, who is running the propaganda. As you can see, the money is coming from kind of one place. There is foreign funding, Islamist funding too, including funding from Qatar, including funding from many Turkey. But that has not come in the form of protest money for these organizations. That has come in the form of endowments to different chairs and salaries of different professors who created the narrative, who created the intellectual property that is used today to run the show. So, the protests are not directly getting funded from foreign countries. They actually created the infrastructure in these universities that is providing the intellectual backing for these protests. The protest money is coming mostly from America, as you can see.
Makes it easier to move it around also, right? It's not like...
And also makes it easier to make it legal, because it is easy to accuse somebody of foreign funding if they are directly running a protest or if they are directly disrupting law and order. Whereas if they are funding a professor for the last 10 years, who is then in turn promoting the material that is disrupting law and order, then it's a 1 degree of separation here.
Yeah, everything is freedom of speech. The freedom of speech expression, right to freedom of speech, is a fundamental right of the US under US Constitution given to every US citizen. This is being sorely tested, if you ask me, Utsav. One interesting thing, Columbia University, a lot of arrests, but what I'm hearing is not a single person is going to jail, which is very disappointing. They've been just bussed away from there, and then they took them to some place, booked them, and then I think on their own cognizance, they were allowed to go. So this to me is very disappointing because a lot of damage has occurred. Second thing is, now the law students in Columbia University who took part in all these protests want their exams postponed because they say that they didn't have time to prepare. Who asked you to go to protest? I mean, if Columbia really takes a stand, they need to just let go, go through their exams as planned. If somebody gets an F, too bad. Your priorities are screwed up. Second thing is, now the New York Police Department wants Columbia University to foot the bill, and it makes total sense. They came only at the behest of the Columbia University.
Absolutely. The one thing, another thing I want to point out, Sree, here is, if you observe all these protests and the way they are panning out across the country, you will see that it is going to last a long time. Even though the physical protests might ebb out, there is going to be simmering narrative building and protest around the entire country that will go on for a long period of time. And one thing that I have seen in this protest is the absolute fantastic narrative building that has been done by all the actors involved. The Islamists, the extreme left, and the foreign actors. All of them have done a fantastic job in creating the narrative, because you see, most of the protesters don't know much about Palestine or Gaza or Hamas for that matter. Most of them are enamored by the romanticism of getting compared to the anti-draft protests that were done by their fathers and grandfathers in the Vietnam War era. So the fact that they were able to connect 2 generations before, and the ones who created the narrative, and romanticize it in the manner where the person, the child who is the student who is protesting, literally thinks that, oh, my grandfather was doing this in bell-bottom pants and sideburns, and he was a great hero, and now I am going to be like him, and I will be looked upon like that 20 years from now, 30 years from now. That romanticism, they have succeeded very well. Obviously, there is no connection, because back in the Vietnam era, the Americans who were protesting were not supporting a terrorist organization that calls for the complete wiping out of an entire race and religion of people. But I mean, that has been missed somewhere in the whole presentation. But we have to give credit to those people who are running this show here and who are running the narrative here. So they have really done a fantastic job, and to some degree, I think President Biden and the Democrats are realizing that this is actually backfiring on them. This is something that is not something that's going to help them out, because now you have an entire generation of middle American, mom and pops who took loans to send their kids to these expensive colleges, and they realize that they have been wasting all their time and money. So they're not going to like what is happening right now.
So let's draw some parallels here. Doesn't this feel reminiscent of the Black Lives Matter protests?
So in terms of the infrastructure that was used, in terms of the funding that was done, in terms of the talking points that were initially brought in, it is very reminiscent. And in terms of the timing, you have to remember that before every elections in America, about a year before the election happens, there is a mass mobilization that starts. And usually it benefits the Democrats. So, President Obama himself was that mobilization, as in he was the person who was the focus of that mobilization in 2008. The Occupy Wall Street movement was the focus of the mobilization in 2012, before the 2012 election, where Obama got re-elected. In 2016, it was the women's movement, the Women's March, when Hillary Clinton was running against Trump. And of course, in 2020, it was the BLM, the Black Lives Matter movement. So it is quite reminiscent of this pattern of political mobilization that happens usually to the benefit of the Democrats before every major election. But in my opinion, if you ask me, I think this time it is not in their control, number one. And this time it is going to most likely backfire on them in terms of their electoral politics and how it's going to impact the elections.
I want you to look into the crystal ball and give us a prediction. Vietnam protests resulted in Lyndon Johnson not seeking a second term. Now fill in the blank for me. What do you think Biden's going to do?
He's going to seek a second term. He's going for it. Because I'll be honest with you. Given what is happening in geopolitics today and the way our leadership in America, the thought leadership in Washington, D.C., the policymakers in Washington, D.C. are goofing up, messing up on every major geopolitical posture, every major foreign policy issue. I don't want to get into the topic of another faux pas that President Biden did today about calling India and Japan, xenophobic. But given the number of mistakes we are making today, I have to say that today's generation of politicians are not as smart as the politicians of the Cold War era. And I can go on a separate show to kind of do that comparison with you, but I really don't think they're as smart. So
thank you so much, Utsav. And viewers, that's all for today. As you see that we have unearthed a lot of information. If you need more info, go to our description section, go to the references. We've given you 5 or 6 links. Go through those, browse through them, because chances are that this is going to linger for some more time, because there is an objective. Clearly, there is an objective. The way I saw it, Utsav, and I'll just say it for what it's worth. See, if you look at who is behind this, not just Soros, but the Rockefeller Brothers Fund also.
Yes.
Now, if you look at who were the 2 people who supported Obama in 2008, the 2 R's, Rothschild and Rockefellers. These were the people who supported him. I mean, he was like a first-term senator. Nobody knew him. Suddenly he's running for president and all the chips fall in place. So somewhere something happened, and to counter this, Hillary went to the other extreme the next time around 8 years later by having designated people already assigned, pre-assigned to her, which led to other stuff, right? So if you look at that way, then the Rockefellers, maybe they have a candidate in mind, not Biden, because this 15 million over so many years, and plus who knows, Rockefeller, I know at least they've put 400,000, and we don't know the exact details. Somebody of course will dig it up and we'll share that with you guys. So a lot of money at play here. I don't know who Rockefeller will root for. One person that comes to my mind, want to guess?
You go ahead, tell me.
Michelle Obama.
So Michelle Obama's name has cropped up many times in these conversations, and I'm 100% sure that there are Democrat operatives, there are pollsters who have done public opinion analysis on Michelle Obama. I'm 100% sure of that. I'm 100% sure that they are looking at it very seriously, or they had looked at it very seriously. I'm not sure if they're still in the play. But I don't think that Michelle Obama herself was that eager to take that role and what came with it. And I also feel that their responses may not have been that good, because you have to remember, while Michelle Obama has certain benefits of being the first lady, African American woman, which would have been very attractive for a certain segment of the identity politics population, but you have to remember that Obama's strength during this entire campaign, where he was pulled up and brought to the center stage, was his ability to enthrall audiences. He was a great speaker. He delivered great speeches. He attracted people's attention. I'm not saying that he was a great policymaker. So, I'm not always a fan of Obama's policymaking, but certainly he was a good speaker. And I'm not so sure.
Utsav, I'm sorry, I disagree with you. He had a great teleprompter team.
Okay. But, at the end of the day,
when you took away the teleprompter, he was like,
That is true. See, I agree with you. At the end of the day, it is what people perceive, not what a person actually delivers. And I felt that even today, a person who is not an Obama fan, which I know many of, myself being one, I was never a fan of Obama per se. But most people who, if you ask them, what do you think about his qualities? One of them that they will mention is that he was a good orator. That I have seen in many places.
Oh yes, that I agree. I mean, at that time, I did not have the wisdom that I have today. So I agree with you. So totally true. So viewers, there you have it, an in-depth analysis of who is behind all these things. Sometimes such videos do have some good consequences, in the sense that somebody wakes up and says, okay, let us make a few calls and make sure that this doesn't spread like this. Because right now it is finals time in many campuses. This is not the kind of distraction students need. Even those who are not participating, but put their head down and they are going to classes. But if there is, tear gas being fired, there's you can see some of the protesters are wearing masks, saying that somebody is going to tear gas us. So it's taking it a little extreme. But if you see campuses across the country, suddenly everybody wears gas masks. So there is a toolkit. There's a toolkit saying, wear it today, because I've heard from a little birdie that this could be used today, or whatever it is. So this is a huge amount of distraction.
And also faculty. Sree, what is most alarming in these protests is not the fact that the students are doing it. I mean, they are obviously attached to a romantic notion about these things. There is a significant number of faculty, and that's why I brought up the foreign funding as a secondary impact on these protests. The years and years of Qatari, Turkish, and all these foreign funding, even Saudi funding long back, they all have created this whole cadre of humanities / art professors and faculty that almost consider it their responsibility, their literal job description to do these things, as if they don't do it, they will be ostracized by their own friends and their colleagues. So that is very dangerous. That's very scary.
Absolutely. And viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Utsav, thank you so much for coming at such short notice and really sharing with us a lot of data that helped us put together this slide deck for you and for our viewers' benefit. Viewers, please share this thing among your WhatsApp groups. Share it on Facebook. Share it wherever you can. Hindu Action Group and PGurus needs all your support. We are basically opening in your eyes to what is happening, because the same thing could very well take place in India. much cheaper to run these kinds of protests in India. I'm telling you. So thank you once again, Utsav. Namaskar.
Namaskar.